Again, a word of welcome this morning as we continue with these Gospels from Luke and the various parables that he's been sharing along the way. Today I want to go back to the very first words that we heard in the reading from Sirach. The Lord is a God of justice. That is really quite a very simple sentence. Yet we know that justice is complicated at its very best. To understand justice can be very baffling. Justice is oftentimes a rather elusive proposition. Even if we have been able to discern what is just in a given situation, sure enough, another situation will turn up where justice is understood entirely different. It is difficult, and I believe the culture and at times the governments of the world make it even more complicated to understand truly what justice means for us. Not being able to define it is not a reason to not pursue justice in the world in which we live. However complicated justice actually is, and again, how our world community sometimes adds to that confusion, it's important for us to have times in which we have good examples, good reminders of the importance of living a just life. And that's why I look, as we did earlier, at our young men and women who have chose to be confirmed. They offer us a wonderful gift this morning. As they have gone through this process with their families, their sponsors, all the volunteers, asking all the important questions, knowing full well that they could say yes, maybe, or no to confirmation, gave them full latitude to ask all the questions and to be able to discern the answer that was right for them. I had the privilege and the honor of celebrating with them the Eucharist on that Sunday evening, as they came together knowing that that would be a time in which hopefully they would have reached that choice in their life. And as I began to see the crowd that had gathered, I began to realize the journey that I have been most fortunate to share with them. Many of them, I was present when their families brought them in as an infant and was able to celebrate their baptism. I was there to be able to celebrate with them as they celebrated their first reconciliation, as I at then could sit on the floor with them, maybe not so much now, but talked about the difference between a good life and a great life. The value of being able to forgive and be forgiven. The joy of being here in the gym as they came forward for their very first time to the big table and were included for Holy Communion. And now stepping forward for confirmation. What joy and what an honor for not only me but for all of us who have been near their faith journey. And as parents began to come forward that evening to receive communion, I began to recognize more than a few of them who I actually had presided at their weddings here at St. Joan of Arc. How can this be for someone 41 years old? How can that possibly have happened? All right, joke there, that's a joke. Was totally honored to realize what a long and wonderful journey that has been. And so today, this group of young men and women give us a gift. They give us the opportunity to reconfirm in our own life the gift of faith. They give us perhaps a vitamin shot right where we need it at this time in our journey of faith and in our journey as citizens of the U.S. They give us that extra sense of hope that they will continue to say yes and so can we. So today we talk about justice. For help and direction in our attempts to understand justice, and again, how we might be able to come up with an understanding. As I thought about justice, it certainly is a kissing cousin to fairness. Maybe that's one place to start in terms of understanding what justice means. And yet, as I began to think about that, if fairness is the definition, we also run into difficulties there. If any of you have been a parent or have had the experience of being with young children, to then talk to them about we're going to do what's fair, or this is what I have decided is fair, you're going to quite likely get a fair amount of pushback around, well, what does fair actually mean? I can also ramp that up a bit in a parish this size that has councils and committees, and then committees that serve committees, and then subcommittees, and everybody also having a full green light, thanks be to God, to express opinions about absolutely everything under the sun. So try talking to a large parish around what's fair and what isn't fair, and you're still going to have the same struggles that you would have with a younger crowd. There will always be discrepancies around what we mean by fair. Sirach describes for us the foundation of what is Catholic social teaching, which we call the preferential option. This leads us to an understanding of justice. God is not unduly partial toward those who struggle and often misidentified as being weak. There are no favorites in God's world. Bottom line, when it comes to social Catholic teaching, God hears the cry of the oppressed. God indeed loves all of us in the same way. Yet, when our portion of suffering is greater for one reason or another at any given time in our life, it would seem to me that God's love is even more available precisely at those times that we feel broken. Even more challenging than the idea that God would prioritize someone else above us. Think about that, how you feel about that. But then to take it one step further, even perhaps a stranger idea, is that we are called to do exactly as God does. To be able to be willing to step aside and recognize our brothers and sisters who have far more and oftentimes very different needs. So one could ask each one of us, how's that working for you? To think that perhaps you give up your own place in line that others might be able to receive, who may have, and oftentimes do, more urgent needs than any one of us. We hear this in the gospel today. Whoever exalts themselves will be humbled, and the one who humbles themselves will be exalted. Only once, I suspect, that I am not as deserving as I demand or expect to be served immediately. That's an important step in our life, to recognize that we are not the one always with the greatest need. And only once I place the needs of others before my own needs can I actually claim any insight into what is fair and just. To have that courage and that wisdom to step out of line, to at least be willing to recognize that perhaps the brother or sister behind you might truly have a greater and a more urgent need? Would I even know? Would it even occur to me to step out of line when somebody else's needs perhaps are more prevailing? It's hard for us as human beings. It's particularly difficult as Americans. We have been on a very long path of individualism. We are fed a steady diet of you earned it, you deserve everything. I was born in 1950 to parents who came through difficult times. And as they brought myself, my family into this world, as was true for many, they had one very dedicated plan, which was their children would have a better life than they did. Not that that's a bad goal, but sometimes as Americans that took us down perhaps an unjust path, and that oftentimes the better life meant more and more things. And unfortunately for our environment, a lot of those things as plastic came into our world at that time. To be able to fill our world with what you thought your children would want, regrettably, was not always the case. We can ill afford to be convinced of our own self-righteousness and to vote ourselves as being, again, good servants. Catholic social teaching is not just the domain of certain parishes. The gospel calls all people to the challenging vision of justice. Our pledge as a parish to social justice is an important pledge. It can, at times, take us down a road that makes us think we're the good parish versus the bad parish that isn't so strong on social justice. And it can lead us into a place of feeling rather elitist. The fact of the matter is, yes, we do understand social justice, but every follower of Christ, every community that follows Christ is called to the same commitment. So part of our mission is giving, as our confirmands did, good example. Pope Francis has told us that in God, justice is mercy, and mercy is justice. There may be a simpler way to define or give an example of what justice really is all about. I want you to think of God as a mother, with the question being asked of the mother, which of your children do you love the very most? Which one of your children, God, do you love the very, very most? And the mother, God's response, would be the one that needs it most. So I invite us to think about that in our own faith journey. How we, again, may be open to all the ways in which we are humbled and also exalted in life, in order to achieve justice for the entire family of God. And again, I want to thank all of our young men and women at this important time in our life to give us that most important infusion of energy, justice, and peace, and commitment. Thank you. Please stand.